Ukraine looks anxiously towards its northern border and a flash influx of Russian troops into Belarus. They used to call their neighbors friends, and now Russians are firing rockets from there. CNN, the announcement last week by Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko that his country and Russia would form a joint regional force and carry out exercises set off alarm bells in Kiev. The last time Belarusian and Russian forces held joint exercises in February, many of those Russian forces went on to cross the Ukrainian border in their ill-fated drive towards the capital. It's not that Belarus has the mighty army; it doesn't. But the prospect of Ukraine's long northern border becoming a passage gate passageway for Russian forces for the second time this year would be a nightmare for Ukraine's already stretched forces. Ukraine and Belarus shared a 1,000-kilometer frontier, much of it sparsely populated and thickly forested. The first group of Russian soldiers to join the new force with Belarusian troops arrived in Belarus Saturday. Minsk Defense Ministry said altogether the Russian contingent will be less than 9,000 people, according to the head of Belarus Department of International Military Cooperation, Valery Levenko. At the moment, the Ukrainian army is conducting offensives in the east and the south while holding off Russian forces in parts of Donetsk and Zaporizhia. After 7 months of war, the Ukrainian military has suffered attrition just like its enemy. Moving forces to defend its north flanks would stretch forces already fighting on multiple fronts. Predictably enough, Belarus says the joint force is purely defensive. The country's defense minister Viktor Karenin said that all activities carried out at the moment are aimed at providing a sufficient response to activities near our borders. Those activities, according to Belarus, are aimed at deterring Ukrainian preparations to attack the country. Lukashenko said last week that his government had been warned about strikes against Belarus from the territory of Ukraine. Foreign Minister Vladimir Mackay followed up Friday, saying an anti-terrorist operation was underway amid report of impending provocations by nearby states. Ukraine has vehemently denied the claims. The foreign ministry said it categorically rejected these racist insinuations by the Belarusian regime. We cannot rule out that this diplomatic note may be part of a provocation on the part of the Russian Federation. Vladimir President Volodymyr Zelensky told a meeting of the G7 group of the world's advanced economies last week that US peacekeepers should be sent to the border. Russia is trying to directly draw Belarus into this war, Zelensky told the G7. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky left and Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko. There's certainly been much more movement of military hardware on the railways of Belarus. Social media videos have shown multiple rail convoys of tanks and other equipment moving across the country. The markings on one convoy are from the Moscow military region. Analysts think it's probable that much of this hardware belongs to Russia and is being retrieved from stocks in Belarus to make up for the losses Russian forces have suffered in Ukraine, especially last month. Less likely that this Spain of activity indicates that Belarus is preparing to enter the fray. U.S. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said last week the U.S. had not seen indications that Belarusian troops are preparing to go in or will go in. Any additional troops under Russian command is something to be concerned about. But we're just not there yet. Despite open bombastic rhetoric, Lukashenko has not committed his forces to Russia's special military operation, and most analysts believe that even if it would make a little difference. Konrad Muzika, an independent defense analyst based in Poland, follows the Belarus military closely and believes that they are relatively weak. Muzika said on Twitter, the Belarusian armed forces are largely a mobilizational force. Their manpower is at around 50 to 60% of the required peacetime strength. To reach full strength, they'd need to mobilize at least 20,000 men, Muzika added. That would be a warning sign, but Lukashenko repeated last week that Belarus was not planning to announce any mobilization. Unlike Russian forces, the Belarus military rarely conducts exercises above the battalion level, but has had a high level of exercises this year. Another was announced last week. Selhi Nayev, a commanding officer of Ukraine's joint forces, said last week that is another demonstration of their readiness and the artificial increase in the level of tension. Analyst Musica imagines three scenarios. The exercises are designed to prepare for the attack by NATO states. They aim to tie up Ukrainian forces along the border or are preparations for the assault on Ukraine. The first is not going to happen. The last option would be immensely unpopular in Belarus, where there is nowhere near the level of animosity towards the Ukraine that had been whipped up in Russia. But it's in Moscow's interest that the Ukrainians worry about their northern border, not least because of its proximity to Kiev. Nayev says Belarus is already important for Russian missile attacks. Ukraine estimates there are four ballistic missile systems there and 12 S-400 surface-to-air systems and some Iranian-made drones came from the north last week. More Russian combat planes have also begun arriving in Belarus, according to the Belarusian Defense Ministry. Ukrainian officials estimate there are as few as 1,000 Russian troops in Belarus at the moment, but a surge would create a threat of the repeated offensive in the northern operational zone, in particular on the city of Kiev, Nayev said. Despite the recent partial mobilization in Russia, the US-based Institute for the Study of War, called the ISW, believes the Russian military is at the moment incapable of forming another phalanx to attack Ukraine from the north. Russian forces continue to attrit their own combat capabilities as they impale themselves on attempt to capture tiny villages in Donbass and simply do not have the combat effective mechanized troops available to supplement a Belarusian incursion into northern Ukraine, the ISW said Friday. Lukashenko has trodden a fine line throughout the conflict, supporting Russian President Vladimir Putin's special military operation without committing his own troops. Last week, he said, "We are participating in the operation. We do not hide it, but we are not killing anyone. We are not sending our military anywhere. We do not violate our obligations." However, his room for maneuver may be shrinking. The mass protests that erupted after his disputed re-election in 2020 left Lukashenko ever more reliant on Moscow, as the Kremlin's need for some wins in Ukraine becomes more urgent. Each ally to the West may find itself under growing pressure to collaborate. But at the same time, Lukashenko will want to avoid the risk of his untested troops getting more mauled in Ukraine, as he is vulnerable to further domestic unrest if his security forces are distracted or weakened.